We're back on a Thursday. Welcome back to the review. I'm your host, Brendan Hodges, and today we're bringing you episode 3 of CBB Review's flagship podcast. Here's wishing you a happy holiday season. There's a safe one as well, and there's plenty to talk about today in the world of college basketball. Big milestones reached by both college athletes in general and then over in the women's college game as well. Before all that, though, let's hit my starting five. As I said last time out, the writers that come on this show, they have opinions. They get to spell them out in detail for at least an hour every time. So it only seems fair that I give myself 5 minutes to do the same thing. Here we go. Today, based upon the news that we've received via different sports media outlets, I'm going to defend student athletes everywhere. Now, I'll relent. It's going to be pretty easy for me. For those of you who don't know, I played Division III football at McAllister College. What you probably do know, though, is that for the past 4 years, I wouldn't have been able to say that if the purpose was to promote myself or a product that I had made. Now, I didn't do that anyway, but I have a real example for anybody who's going to be listening to this podcast. So a college teammate of mine, he's going to remain nameless, is a gifted, and I mean a very gifted poet. Going into sophomore year, he'd written and published a book of his poetry. Now, to the naked eye, football and poetry are completely unrelated. To the NCAA, though, it's only unrelated if the two never metaphorically see each other. That teammate of mine had to create new social media to promote this book, and he did find some success with that. But as I looked into the situation more, I asked myself, what's the point? That student athletes can't be just that under the contract they sign, the letter of intent from the NCAA. Why can't they show off the multiple talents they have and use their name and likeness to promote those? You want to know what the NCAA's answer to that is? It's A, money, and B, because if they do, they'll take away eligibility, and to me and many other college athletes, it's ridiculous. We've seen cases like the Iowa Swimmers, a UCF kicker in college football who had a YouTube page and decided to stop playing football so he could continue that, and there are plenty others as well. Now, the flip side of that argument is that you hear people say, no student athlete shouldn't be paid to play. They're already getting full ride scholarships. And my answer to that, I don't believe that every Division I soccer player or lacrosse player or hockey player is on a full ride. Football, basketball, completely different story. And even so, there are walk-ons that don't have that as well and could use that extra money to really better themselves and help pay for school. That's just a small issue, though. The bigger issue that I have with that take is that the schools wouldn't even be the ones paying them. If you have somebody putting together a YouTube channel or selling t-shirts, it'd be random people on the street who are buying it. So that argument is just invalidated. Now, some of those people may not even know they're buying something from a student athlete, and we still have situations where student athletes are being punished for being well-rounded. Now, why is being well-rounded so important? It builds up an individual skill set. How many of those student athletes are going to go pro? Let me just ask you that straight up. How many do you think will go pro? Hardly any of them at all. There are thousands across the nation, and maybe 0.5% of those will get to play professional football, basketball, whatever. So they need to build those skills that are making them well-rounded and figure out what they're good at besides their sport. And if they make money off of that, more power to them. They have a skill that people want them to use and build and mold and make them a better person and find success building themselves alive. So to the NCAA, just to start, let student athletes do that. Let them be well-rounded and promote themselves with their name and likeness by telling people who they really are, by telling people they're a student athlete and they're proud of it. That's my rant for the day. And like I said, we have a ton to talk about. That's just part of it. We'll come back to it in just a sec. But first, let's introduce our panel today. Only one, though, able to join me today. We had a couple of late dropouts. So please let me introduce you the newest member of our panel out of Baltimore, Maryland. He's currently a student at the Community College of Baltimore County at Dundalk. Please welcome to the program contributing writer Ben Hall.
How you guys doing? I'm very excited to come on. It's my first time. I was expecting more writers today, but it'll just be us. So I'm really excited to talk about some college basketball.
One-on-one today. That was the starting five. Now let's move on. Throw Ben here into the fire right away. And this doesn't have to do with the whole pay for play thing or compensation due to name and likeness, but Division I transfers did get some really good news yesterday at the NCAA Division I Council, voting to grant a blanket waiver allowing all D1 transfers to play immediately. Now, with college basketball season in full swing, the most immediate impact is felt in the ranks of collegiate hoops, where a number of notable players were able to suit up last night and will be able to suit up tonight through the weekend and through the rest of the season. Now, an NCAA spokesperson also noted on social media that the D1 Council will consider permanent transfer rule changes at its January meeting. So, Ben, it was just going to be starting with you anyway, but since you're the only one here, feel free to let's just start a discussion. Which team do you think stands to benefit most from this transfer rule change?
Three teams that really stand out overall: Butler, Xavier, and Creighton. Butler got Bo Hodges, who was the Eastern Tennessee State Freshman of the Year in that conference. That's a big get for them, especially right now where they're kind of looking for scorers. Xavier is getting Ben Stanley, which is huge for them. He was one of the top transfers this offseason. And lastly, Alex O'Connell to Creighton is going to be huge for them. He played at Duke, really good. But overall, out of those three, I think Xavier getting Ben Stanley is the most important. I think out of the three, he's the best player, and I think he'll show that. We saw Nike Sabande. He's going to Pitt. He'll definitely have an impact on that team who struggled a bit. And they actually just beat Miami last night. So I think all of these teams are really benefiting from this. And overall, I think it needed to be done. Now, in the future, it's a lot of mixed feelings on it. You can't really say, well, some guys get it and some guys don't. I think it needs to be all guys got to sit out or all guys should get the opportunity to play. So like I said, I think this is going to be really good for this year, especially coming off of a COVID year where a lot of guys had to make some tough decisions.
You mentioned it being a COVID year, and that's the end-all, be-all with this scenario, and partially why at least in my opinion, this was put forth in a COVID year. You could have players that are opting out or just unable to play because they are quarantining for a couple weeks at a time. So how does the inclusion of these transfers then, in your mind, really, how do I want to say this or put it delicately, just help them keep the numbers up and keep their programs from maybe pausing for a couple weeks, or does it even matter?
I think it helps quickly. They got more opportunities now, but overall, I don't think it'll really have too big of an impact just because the guys are at practice. And if somebody tests positive with all the close contacts, I think they're going to have to stop anyways. But it gives teams more opportunities to rely on other guys, and I think that's the most important. Like you said, guys opting out, some guys being affected by it, and most importantly, guys who have already tested positive and had it earlier in the season, midway through the year, might not be up to par with the other guys just because, even – I'm not talking about football, but in football, we've seen some guys test positive and deal with some cramping issues and stuff like that. So I think in basketball, we could probably see that issue down the road. We don't really know how it will affect guys. Everybody is affected differently, but I think overall this is really good, especially this year for the sport.
And not just for college basketball, but it's all Division I transfers for the rest of this year. And perhaps if the decision is reached in January for in perpetuity. You never really know. And we've seen different examples in other sports, like Chris Blake at Syracuse, with a Syracuse football program, not being able to transfer back home and play right away. And others are slipping my mind. But in just regards to college sports, it's one of a couple changes we're going to cover today. And what do you think the NCAA's mindset is now with it, not just it being a COVID year, but with student athletes becoming more empowered and wanting these different rules so they're able to take advantage of the opportunity they have to play collegiately because maybe they don't get a chance to play at the professional level?
To me, it kind of is frustrating. I think the NCAA is finally changing, which they should have done a while ago. But like in real life, if you want to leave a job and go work at another one, you can. They're not getting held back for a year. And these college sports are very similar to a job. So I don't think you should punish the athlete for leaving somewhere that wasn't the right fit for him and going to a new school in the next year and playing there in any sport. All sports have that. Even if it's not just the program's not the right fit, just maybe they don't like the area, they need to be closer to home, their family's having issues, anything like that. I don't think the NCAA should be punishing these athletes by making them wait a year, which could change a lot of stuff. But like I said, I think the NCAA is making a change, which is needed, and we'll see how it goes throughout the next few years.
It'll definitely be interesting to see how it plays out, along with the other changes we're going to, or potential changes that we'll be covering later in the show. For now, though, we'll go ahead and move on to other stories that happened over the last couple of days. Here are the biggest stories in college hoops since we last saw you. Another one of these changes that may happen, and I covered this in the starting five, for the first time in over 3 decades, the Supreme Court's going to hear a case involving the NCAA. Yeah, yesterday the court agreed to review a court decision in an antitrust lawsuit the NCAA has said blurred the line between student athletes and professionals by removing caps on compensation that major college football and basketball players can receive. The case will be argued in 2021, with the decision expected by June. And again, just another change that could happen. It's compensation, not necessarily for play, but using their name and likeness to promote themselves. Actually, I believe college cheerleaders can already do that. But this one specifically mentions college football and basketball players, since those two sports are big revenue boosters for different collegiate institutions then.
So my opinion on this, I'm very high on players needing to be paid for their name and likeness. To me, like I said just before, I think college sports are like a job, and, they're taking all that time, and people use the argument of the full scholarship. But the people, they're getting a full scholarship for a reason. It's like a job. So outside of the sport, if they want to, like you said earlier, he wrote a poem and he should be getting paid for that. If they want to make a YouTube channel, why can they not get paid for that? It just does not make sense. These kids some of them are very famous around the world, and they're going to make $0 legally. They're going to make $0 because they're playing with the NCAA. The NCAA is making money off of these athletes. So for them to tell them they cannot make money outside of the sport, I don't think that the colleges should be able to straight up hand the players money or tell them to go here, because I think that'll ruin the sport. But name and likeness, that has to be changed, just because this is like a job, and some of these kids come from nothing and need the money, any money they can get. So I really think it needs to be changed.
On a similar note, another latest congressional proposal would overhaul college sports in their entirety. The College Athlete Bill of Rights was proposed earlier today by Senators Cory Booker and Richard Blumenthal, and would create major change in college sports as a whole. Some notable inclusions in the Bill of Rights include name, image, and likeness, revenue sharing between players and programs, medical care, and education. So plenty of other opportunities for change across the landscape of collegiate sports. We can't go into those in very much detail. The article that mentions that Bill of Rights is courtesy of ESPN, so go and check that out. It's an interesting read. Read it this morning. On to more game action, though, and just college basketball focused topics. CBS Sports Classic is going to be held in Cleveland this weekend. 22nd North Carolina, originally slated to face 20th ranked Ohio State, and Kentucky was set to face UCLA. That schedule, though, has now changed. The Tar Heels will face the Wildcats, and the Buckeyes will take on the Bruins now, and organizers have said the change was made to more closely align COVID-19 testing protocols between competing programs and their respective conferences. So the NCAA doing everything in their power just to make sure the games are played. And I think that's what everybody wants to see, especially between 4 quality programs that, while some of them have struggled early this year, they could definitely be in the tournament.
Yeah, I like this just because it shows that the college is doing everything they can to get games in. But this really excites me. Kentucky, a lot of people have kind of thrown in the towel and say they're done, but I just don't believe that. Coach Calipari is one of the greatest coaches in college basketball right now, and he's got a ton of freshmen. There's some adjustments that can be made for him, and we'll see how he does down the road. But I really think that they're going to still make the tournament and still be competitive like they usually are. And for the other teams in this tournament, all 4 teams in this tournament are really good teams. UCLA and Ohio State are probably the lesser of the 4, in my opinion. But I think that'll be a good game too. Both of those teams are top 25 teams. Maybe UCLA can sneak back into the top 25 in the next few weeks. But I like all 4 teams in this, and I also am excited to see the NCAA doing everything they can to get the guys to play.
And finally, new milestone reached in college women's college hoops. Stanford head coach Tara VanDeveer won her 1,099th game when the Cardinal defeated Pacific University 104-61 on Tuesday night. Now, why is that important? Well, the win pushes VanDeveer past the mark set by the late Pat Summitt in 2012. So congratulations to Coach VanDeveer. We'll talk about that a little later in the program. But for now, those were your biggest stories in college hoops since we last saw you. We're going to go ahead, take a timeout, regroup. Coming up next, though, another news segment and our second debate, as well as our 3-point play. Stay with us here on The Review. We'll be right back. I'm going to reset my timer.
Okay.
That was good.
Yeah.
Okay, so, drawing a blank. Second debate about VanDeveer Summitt and other college coaches. And then trivia. We're cruising through this. I don't have a time limit on this meeting, right? Because there's two of us.
No.
We had one of those 40-minute time limit meetings last time. Awful.
It sucks. It really does.
We were really rushing to get the second block done. All right. Second block in 3, 2, 1. Head to cbbreview.com to see our first update to the 2021 bracketology. It's pretty good. And while you're at it, read some of the stories from our wonderful writers like Mr. Ben Hall, or send something in you'd like to hear about right here on the podcast, The Review. First step to all that, though, visiting cbbreview.com. It's a great site. Learned about it when I was in graduate school. I still am, and it's been a great read so far, so check it out. Back here on The Review, though, Brendan Hodges, Ben Hall. Next segment was born out of, I guess I can put it this way. You could call it theft, or you could say that imitation is the most sincere form of flattery. I've liked the idea for a while. Plenty of sports talk shows do this, whether they're on television or they're on radio. It's a game we call Drawing a Blank. I have a couple questions for Ben. He's got some one-word answers, so here we go. Ben, the most exciting conference schedule comes from?
The Atlantic 10 as a whole.
Ooh, why do you say that?
I just believe the Atlantic 10 is slept on. The American Conference it's not Power 5, but it's looked at as one of the higher conferences because they got some ranked teams in it. But I think the Atlantic 10 needs way more respect. Last year with Dayton, they had that big team, and this year we're seeing similar things with Richmond and St. Louis. Richmond had a tough loss a few nights ago, but I still believe Richmond is one of the top non-Power 5 teams in the country, and so is St. Louis. So I really like this conference as a whole. Dayton's good again. I just think that this conference as a whole is very underrated and should be getting viewed at a little higher.
The A10 and even the Big East considered the 6th and 7th power conference, especially in college basketball. Always competitive, always a force in the tournament. Next up, the dark horse candidate for Player of the Year is?
Ayo Dosunmu. He's a dark horse because Luka Garza is running away with it, and I don't think there's any chance he gets caught unless there's an injury. But if that does happen, I think Dosunmu is going to take that over. We're going to see him take over in Big Ten play, and he's really the leader of that Illinois team. When he takes the games over, they win, and they need him. Overall, they need him to win games. So I really like him, and I think if Luka Garza for some reason gets hurt or doesn't win it, I think it will be Ayo Dosunmu.
And next up, blank is in the most danger of having their season spiral out of control.
This was a tough one. I think the easy answer is Kentucky, but I'm going to go with Arizona State. Coming into this year, I think Arizona State was viewed very, very high, and they have a ton of talent. They have one of the most talented teams itself in the nation, but they really have not put it together. They've lost some tough games early. They beat some lesser opponents by a small amount. And I just think Arizona State needs to get it clicking more. They have one of the best players in the country in Remy Martin. Josh Christopher is one of the top recruits in the country. So I just think Arizona State right now is not looking good, especially after their tough loss last night.
And finally, Tara VanDeveer breaking Pat Summitt's win record is blank.
Impressive. Pat Summitt was one of the best coaches in all of college sports. and VanDeveer is up there now as well. She's won 2 national championships, I think. So it was cool to see her get that win and for the Stanford program.
Oh, that's drawing a blank, but let's stay on that last one for a bit. So we mentioned this on Tuesday. Another writer, Matt Carner, one of our colleagues, said this was a story he was watching for throughout the week. And as we know now, it happened. A 104-61 win over Pacific earlier this week saw Stanford head coach Tara VanDeveer take over the all-time lead for wins in women's college basketball. Now, previous record, as we mentioned, held by the late Pat Summitt. But I'll ask you, Ben, in terms of collegiate coaching in all of basketball in general, we're talking Coach K, Roy Williams, Bill Self, Bobby Knight, John Wooden, the whole shebang. Where do these two legendary women's basketball coaches rank for you all time?
I think Summitt is top 5, and I think VanDeveer is top 10. I think Pat Summitt are arguably the best women's coach besides Army Emma. And VanDeveer is really making herself lately a name for that candidate as well. We'll see what she does in the future. I think she could break the top 5, but I think there needs to be more respect into women's basketball coaches overall. Some of these coaches are just impressive what they've done, especially with not as much recruits. In men's college basketball, we see those guys get the same recruits every year, and they're great coaches, but some coaches really are just looked at as recruiters. And with these 3 women coaches and these 2 in particular, I think we see more of actual coaching. And, they get a lot of talent, but it's more actual coaching than it is just getting the top players in the country.
I also think it's fair to mention Stanford, an academic power as well as an athletic one. And recruiting to a power like that, whether it's Stanford, Notre Dame, or one of the Ivies, isn't an easy task because the top players in the game on the men's, and I don't know if this is the same that's true on the women's side, they want to go to programs that are like Kentucky, like a UCLA, like a Clemson or Ohio State in college football. And just recruiting to a power like that, a Stanford and Notre Dame, is impressive in itself, and to have consistent success as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. A lot of, like you said, in men's basketball, a lot of guys go to a school. I'm not saying they go in there knowing they're going to be a one and done, but to give them that opportunity of going pro right after their first year if they're good enough. So I think getting a player to commit to come to a school that really, really values academics is very impressive.
And then lastly, with this topic, as I struggle to remember what I was actually going to ask you, oh boy, there we go. Women's basketball has slowly become, it's had less parity or more parity, however you want to say it. It used to be UConn, at least as long as I've been alive, because they have been the face of women's college basketball. They win, and they win some more. But now you're seeing schools like South Carolina, Stanford, Baylor won a national championship in the past at least 20 years. I don't remember what year it was off the top of my head, but we're seeing more schools become like more competitive, and it's really exciting to watch. So not only is it becoming harder to win in the women's game because there are so many more good teams, but it's becoming more popular to watch women's basketball as well. You have the tournament broadcast on ESPN, whereas the men's tournament is broadcast on that family of networks, TBS, CBS, True TV. It's becoming very enjoyable to watch. We're following women's collegiate players and thus the coaches as well.
Yeah, women's college basketball has really, really gotten good over the past few years. Many people may have thought it kind of got boring late in the season just because every year UConn would just dominate, and it would be the same thing every year. But like you said, lately South Carolina, they've been really good. They've taken down some teams, and UConn isn't winning it every year. Notre Dame, they're competing, they're winning games. And I also think it also is good for the sport when you have good non-tournament games. When you early in the year, when a Notre Dame takes on a UConn, it's great for the sport, or a South Carolina takes on a UConn, it's great for the sport. And we're seeing that more lately, and I think that's really helping the sport in the long run, just because people are seeing these great games earlier in the year and not just in the NCAA tournament.
Absolutely. We want to see more of them just in collegiate sports in general. No offense to mid-major schools. They're competitive with the big boys as well. But when you have a historic program like a Notre Dame and a Stanford going up against each other in women's college basketball, it's a sight to see. And I'd argue there are just as many great moments in women's college basketball, if not more so, than in men's college basketball. So plenty of respect to go around in the coaching circles as well. It's definitely tight knit, and I'm sure women's and men's coaches have a massive amount of respect for each other. And a ranking of coaches is really subjective. So we'll leave it at that, and we'll go ahead and move on to one of my favorite segments because it's the only other one that I have plenty of control over. We're heading in to our 3-point play. Now, for those of you who don't know how this works, and Ben is one of those, thank goodness, I can be hard on him today. I have 3 basketball-related trivia questions for Ben today that make up our 3-point play. Each correct answer is worth a point. The most points wins the day. So congratulations, Ben. You have won today's segment of the 3-point play already, as long as you get a question right. Now, we have been keeping track of the scores. Right now, leader in the clubhouse is one of the 2 members of the team who could not make it today, founder of CBB Review, Matt Majinski, partially because he was the only person to participate in this twice so far. He has 5 points, Matt Carner has 1, and Sam Bass has 3. Everyone else hasn't participated yet, but Ben's here today. Ben, are you ready for your questions?
Yes.
All right, we'll start with question 1. And lucky you, I'm not giving anybody multiple choice today. I was kind of hoping that everybody else would be here. So it's all or nothing. This team was the first in NCAA men's basketball history to start 5 African-American players. Now, before you answer this question, let me make something very clear, because there was a guy who did not listen to the rules or the questions at all last time out. Sam Bass, calling you out. I need the name of the school when they did this. So back when they started these 5 African-American players, what was the name of the school then? What is the name of the school now? And what is their mascot?
I just learned about this recently, but for some reason, Texas State Bobcats.
You're in the right state. That is the wrong school, though. Formerly known as Texas Western, they are now known as the University of Texas at El Paso, and their mascot is the Miners. A tough one, and I'm only tough on you because I thought there would be 2 other people here and didn't want to do multiple choice. We'll go ahead and move on to question 2. Nolan Richardson is the winningest coach in Arkansas basketball history, and his teams played an up-tempo game with intense pressure defense. What name did Richardson give this style of play?
This one's definitely going to be wrong.
Would you like me to come up with a couple multiple choice answers for you?
Yes.
All right, I'll give you 3, just because you're the only one here and I'm putting you on the spot. A, the pressure cooker. B, 40 minutes of hell. And C, basketballs to the wall.
B, 40 minutes of hell.
That is correct. That is correct. He's on the board. He has officially won this week's 3-point play because he's the only one here. Finally, this team shares 2nd place with Duke for most consecutive Final Four appearances after UCLA. And I'll give you choices for this one as well. A, Kentucky. B, Cincinnati. C, Dayton. Or D, well, I don't even have a D. There we go. You have 3 choices.
Kentucky.
That is incorrect. It is actually the University of Cincinnati, surprisingly enough. So an okay showing in your first 3-point play. And you know what? I'm feeling bad that everybody left you out to dry, so I'll go ahead and let you do the 4-point play question anyway, because I can change the rules whenever I want to. And you're the only one here, and I don't want to waste a good question. So technically, this is your 2-point play question, but we'll still call it the 4-point play. So you know Pete Maravich still holds the record for most points scored in a college career, right? Do you know how many he scored? This isn't the question, by the way. This is just a curiosity. Do you know?
No, I don't.
All right. Well, he holds the record with 3,667 career points. Now, most everyone knows that if they're really like big into college basketball, and even then, it's hard to pull out just a random number. So, could you tell me who sits in second place on that list, what school they went to, and how many points they scored in their career? Ballpark. So you can be like I'll give you within 100.
Oh my God, it's a tough one. I'm gonna take a random guess. Christian Laettner from Duke with 3,270.
Well, you were close on the point totals, at least. It's actually Portland State's Freeman Williams. He sits at second on the NCAA's top scoring leaders. And from 1974 to 78, he averaged over 30 points per game, scoring a grand total of 3,250 points. Sniffing Maravich's record, but not really sniffing it. He's at least 300, 400 points away. And his college career ended quite a long time ago. But for now, that's today's three-point play. That's 1 point for Ben Hall to start off the year. He's on the board, tied for third, so he's making it to the podium as of right now. Right now, though, we'll go ahead, head into a break. Stories to start your weekend and game picks still to come. Stick with us on the review. Back on the review, Brendan Hodges and Ben Hall. Been a good day so far, and we're hitting the home stretch before an exciting weekend of college hoops. First off, though, Ben Hall had an answer for a trivia question. Who was the second leading scorer in NCAA history? His choice was Christian Laettner. During the break, we did a little bit of research. Christian Laettner been well outside the top 25, I'm sorry to say. He scored a little over 2,400 points in his career. And number 25, I believe, had 2,700 or so. Different era of college basketball, though. And not as many threes taken in that era. So Laettner, despite being Mr. Clutch for Duke and the guy that literally almost everybody hated, thank you, ESPN's 30 for 30 for that little reference right there. He does not crack the top 25 starters. Good guess, though. I might have guessed that as well. But then again, I make the questions. Anyway, we're going to head into stories to start your weekend. All of our writers usually have things they're looking forward to for especially weekends in basketball. A lot of exciting action over the course of Friday through Sunday. And I'm always interested in hearing from them. So Ben Hall's got a couple of stories to start your weekend, and let's hear them.
First and foremost, the Crossroads Classic. I think that's going to be great. We haven't seen in the past few weeks as many good games as we did the first week of college basketball just because of COVID and stuff. But most importantly, on Saturday, Gonzaga taking on Iowa is, I think, going to be the game of the year maybe. Iowa is leading the nation in scoring as a team, and I'm really excited to see what Gonzaga can do against Luka Garza. I'm guessing Drew Timme will be on him, and Drew Timme was a guy earlier who I was going to say is my dark horse, but I decided to do Ayo Dosunmu. But like I said, I think that's going to be a great game. Louisville, Wisconsin, that'll be a great game. Virginia, Villanova, that's another top game. If Villanova didn't lose to San Francisco earlier in the year, we could be calling another maybe game of the year. So I think this weekend we're going to have a lot of great games in college basketball, and it's good to see some more top opponents playing each other earlier on in the year.
All right, well, those are Ben Hall's stories to start your weekend. And like you said, plenty of interesting matchups. Conference play started up last night and maybe even earlier for some conferences, and it's heading down that stretch now. It's a grind college basketball season, and already a couple of, if you want to call them upsets in conference play, Purdue beating Ohio State last night, and I'm sure there are plenty of other conference games that were pretty interesting. But for now, let's go ahead and shift gears. It's now the analyst's favorite time of the episode. Game picks. Shot clock is off. It's dark. Nothing's running. It's game clock only here. on episode 3 of the review. But before time does run out on us, Ben Hall is going to give you his game picks for the weekend. As always, Ben, I'm going to ask you for a winner and a score. There's going to be a portion of this that we're going to go pretty quickly just to conserve some time. But we'll start things off with 18th ranked San Diego State hosting BYU. Aztecs, they're a perfect 5-0 to start this season with wins against UCLA and a team you mentioned earlier in the episode, Arizona State. Meanwhile, the Cougars are winners of 3 of their last 4, but are looking for their first win against the Aztecs since 2010. Will they do it on Friday?
No, I think San Diego State is going to dominate BYU. I'm going to go 74-52. San Diego State lost a lot last year, and they picked up right where they left off, even with losing the guys they lost. I think the main difference for this team has been Lamont Butler coming off the bench. He's a pretty highly recruit for them, and him coming off the bench, he's been great. Does really well with the ball and really handles the game and controls the game. So I'm going to go San Diego State to beat BYU pretty handily.
Next on the slate, you mentioned this already as well. First of 2 games in the Crossroads Classic. For those of you who don't know Crossroads Classic, the 4 big Indiana schools. And the first of those 2 games features Butler. They've only played 2 games so far this year. They've won one close against Western Michigan, and their most recent game, a loss pretty recently. Meanwhile, Indiana's coming off a get-right game against Northern Alabama. Butler's Aaron Thompson, Indiana's Trace Jackson Davis, both averaging 20 points or more a game. But which of the teams is going to score a W on Saturday? Butler, Indiana.
I'm going to go with Indiana. I think it's going to be a close one, but I think the difference in this game will be Trace Jackson Davis, and I'm going to take it 67-65 in Indiana's favor.
All right, second game of the Crossroads Classic features the other 2 Indiana schools. Purdue, like we mentioned earlier, is coming off a huge win against conference rival Ohio State. Notre Dame, meanwhile, reeling from a loss at Duke, trying to keep their season from spiraling out of control. Will Notre Dame stop the bleeding, or will Purdue's winning streak continue?
I guess this would be considered an upset. I'm going to take Notre Dame. In a very close one, I will say 61-58. I think Notre Dame's shooting is going to improve. Last night against Duke, they didn't shoot as well as they have earlier in the year, but Notre Dame has proved they can hit shots, and I think they're going to knock the shots down needed to take down Purdue in a little bit of a down year for Purdue.
All right, moving on to the Big 12. Oklahoma State gave TCU all they could handle last night. They fell just short, losing by 1. But now they have no time to breathe. They face an even tougher task in 11th ranked Texas.
I'm going to take another upset, and I'm going to take Oklahoma State. Coming off of this past loss, it kind of seemed like the whole game, it was their game in the second half at least, and then late TCU goes on a 9-0 run and takes them down. But I think Cade Cunningham has his breakout game. I think he's going to go off, and I'm going to take Oklahoma State 67-62 at Texas.
All right, we mentioned this earlier as well. Late schedule change, putting 2 Blue Bloods against each other at the CBS Sports Classic. 22nd ranked North Carolina taking on a struggling Kentucky team. So, Ben, can Kentucky get a win to jumpstart their season, or do the Tar Heels extend the Wildcats' losing streak to 5 in a row and extend the worst start they've had in over 3 decades?
I'm going to go with Kentucky. Coming off of their losses that they've had in a row, I just don't think this is a must-win game for them. And as I stated earlier, I think Kentucky's going to turn it around. This is the biggest game of the year for them because it's a huge difference if they continue to struggle. If they win this game, this will look great for them if they're struggling in SEC play and they're trying to get into the tournament. I think Kentucky's freshmen will step up. It's going to be tough, though. North Carolina's got a more veteran team than they've had in the past with Garrison Brooks and Armando Bacot inside, but I just think Kentucky's going to be able to pull this one out. Very close, though. I'll go 70-68.
All right, the other game in the CBS Sports Classic features 20th ranked Ohio State and UCLA. After a season opening loss, the Bruins have won 5 straight, most of those at home, by the way. Meanwhile, Ohio State's coming off their first loss to conference rival Purdue.
I'm going to take Ohio State in this one. Coming off of that loss, this is a needed win. They're probably going to be out of the rankings on Monday, but I still think they will take down UCLA by 61-55. UCLA is a team that doesn't very much impress me. Watching the first game of the year against San Diego State, they just did not look very good, and I think Ohio State will bounce back in this game and get the big win.
All right, we'll go ahead and get into our fast break. Quick picks, quick scores. We're going to start with Western Kentucky visiting the Alabama Crimson Tide.
Western Kentucky winning 68-64.
Dayton 6-0 against Mississippi all time. Will the Rebels change that this weekend?
Dayton 77-73.
Big no from Ben Hall there. Marquette takes on Xavier in a Big East battle. The Golden Eagles have won the last 4 tilts, but will they make it 5 straight against the rival Musketeers?
I think Marquette wins this. I want to go Marquette 55-51.
Lastly, 9th-ranked Creighton plays St. John's tonight, but we're going to focus on their game against UConn on Sunday. Who wins this Big East clash?
I think Creighton wins it pretty handily. I'm going to go 72-59.
All right, we'll cut the fast break off there. We're going to move on to ranked on ranked action, though. First, delayed action from the ACC Big Ten Challenge. That's right. You thought it was over. No, sir. 23rd ranked Louisville, 12th ranked Wisconsin. Now, a Louisville win will tie the challenge at 6 games apiece. But, Ben, I ask you, will the Cardinals be able to do that?
I don't believe so. I'm going to take Wisconsin to take down Louisville 67-60. Louisville has had a pretty good year this year, coming off of last year where they were expected to be a top 5, top 10 team throughout the season. Louisville's had a good transfer come in and play well for them. But I just think Wisconsin's going to be a little too much. And as I stated earlier, with the veterans, I think Wisconsin is one of the best teams in terms of veterans. They've got a ton of guys there who've been there for a while, and I think Wisconsin will take this game.
All right, moving on, 13th ranked Illinois, 19th ranked Rutgers. Both won their Big Ten conference openers handily, I might add, and now they're ready to take on each other. Ben, who wins in the Big Ten clash?
I think Illinois wins 73-65. Like I said earlier, I think Ayo Dosunmu is the difference on this team, and I think he really steps it up this game. Him versus Ron Harper will be a great matchup, but overall, I just think Illinois is the better team. Rutgers is going to be great this year. Geo Baker is coming off of injury, played great against Maryland, but I just think Illinois has too much for Rutgers to handle.
I like to call this next matchup the game with steady Eddie on either side. 2 of the most stable programs in the country, usually ranked in the top 25, good on both ends. 17th ranked Virginia, 7th ranked Villanova. A little lower than most people may have expected them to be this time of year, but still very dangerous teams, very good, and it's going to be a great matchup. But who takes it? That's the only thing else we got to say.
I believe it will be Villanova 67-66. 2 great coaches, and this is definitely going to be a game to watch out for this weekend.
And finally, we're at our final pick of the week, and it's a game that Ben agrees with me on. It's going to be maybe the game of the year. Who knows? It's really early in the season. But a matchup of 2 top 5 teams, 2 potent offenses, and 2 of the best front courts, if not the 2 best front courts in the entire nation. Gonzaga, coming off a COVID-induced shutdown that had forced them to cancel or postpone their last 5 games, and some big opponents in those last 5 games that either would have changed the rankings drastically or made Gonzaga even more of a favorite to hold on to that number 1 spot. Meanwhile, 3rd-ranked Iowa has just been blowing away the competition. Over 100 points their last 2 games. They've scored over 100 in 3 this season, and they're averaging over 100 on the season. So will Luka Garza carry Iowa to a win over number 1, or will Gonzaga's potent offense take the day?
I'm going to go with Gonzaga. I think this is a high-scoring game. I'm going to say 86-82. Iowa is, as I said, one of the best scoring teams in the country, but in my opinion, Mark Few is the best coach in college basketball. And most mid-major schools, we don't ever see play a schedule that Gonzaga does. We don't even see top schools play a non-conference schedule that Gonzaga does, because Gonzaga Few has never feared any team. He will take on anybody. Just you can look at who he was supposed to play before the COVID hit them. I think Drew Timme, as I said earlier, against Luka Garza will be a great matchup. But Garza's going to play great, but I just think Gonzaga's got too much for Iowa to handle, and I'm going to take Gonzaga in this game.
Well, those are all of our picks for the weekend, and that's all we got in this edition of the review. Episode 3 in the books. Ben, thanks for joining us. Before we close things up, though, just want to remind you guys that next episode will come out next Tuesday, probably a little later than you think, as I'll be traveling most of the day, or maybe you'll have a new host for an episode. Who knows? Maybe we'll see Ben there. Maybe we'll see Matt show up and not be scared to have competition for trivia. Other than that, though, we hope you have a very safe holiday season, everyone, with everything going on. Enjoy it, but be safe with your families. We'll see you next Tuesday for episode 4. And for me, myself, and Ben Hall, we'll say good afternoon. This has been The Review. Have a great rest of your day.